Hey everyone, how are you?
Doing good.
Morning.
Wait a minute,
Hello, hello.
Tejas, you look a little different today, Tejas.
Yeah, I've been hiding indoors and got some reconstruction. Yeah. So, hi for the people that are listening. Obviously, I don't sound like Tejas at all. My name is Annika Stitch, and yeah, I've been working behind the scenes for Watching Privacy. If you've interacted with us at all on Twitter at Watching Privacy, there's no G in that watching. That's me, and also on LinkedIn. So yeah, been behind the scenes, lurking,
And
learning.
look, I wore a brand new Rams Super Bowl hat with the statue, and Tejas isn't even here to see it, but that's
I,
okay.
I am here and
He,
wearing also my Los Angeles hat, so
All
I'm an
right,
ally today instead of an enemy.
this is so cool.
he'll be here to see your 23rd cap, Brent.
Yes,
uh,
yes. So, I mean, let's get into it. There's so much news that we haven't that we've been seeing this week. Just so much to talk about. So let's get into it. I've got this first article for us about Meta opening its first retail store next month. This is going to be in Northern California, over there in the Silicon Valley. Are you all excited about Meta? You look pretty not excited about it.
I mean, my bet is April 25th, 2025 would be the deadline before I see the headline that says Meta is shutting down its retail store.
well, at least you're giving them that amount of time, whereas CNN Plus, it didn't make 10 minutes. I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe in particularly first I'm not a big believer in a widespread adoption of VR. It's a good like a gaming console. It'll have it, but I consider it as a subset of a gaming market. I don't see a widespread adoption. If that is a primary thing they're driving, on top of their surveillance glasses, they don't have much product to sell, and it's not like Facebook is oozing consumer confidence for it to attract people to track them who is walking into the store. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're not gonna see me caught logging into Facebook or walking into a store. I
Could
don't do both.
could we like maybe if we get the community of folks to donate like $5 a head to to the goal of getting Raju to go into a Facebook store? I mean, that was so fun to see that happen. I'll tell you what, I'm not planning on going in that store. It feels like, you know, first of all, I don't really see myself needing those glasses anytime soon, and I really don't. I don't think it's not a broad offering yet. I mean, it's I don't see a whole bunch of people walking into that store, other than people who are specifically there for that. I mean, sometimes you go to a store to browse, or like the Apple store. I really do like going into the Apple store because it's like, oh, there's all this cool stuff around, and it was a great experience. I, this is just a one thing. I mean, there's no other reason to go into that just for that one thing. And if you're not into that one thing, what's the point? And like you said, I feel like if I go into the store, all right, somebody's looking at my face is getting digitized. Everything I do is being digitized and run back through and it'll be sold off or something. So I no, let's the one company to put out a new store to that's the one I don't really expect a lot of people to be excited about. And like you said,
Are
Raju,
you saying
there's reasons for that.
are you saying you don't walk into a store to watch a bunch of ads? That's surprising. Uh,
It's like
well,
Minority Report, the movie with Tom, not
Tom
Tom Hanks,
Cruise.
Tom Cruise, come to life, but on steroids, because you just feel like, the data that they're collecting based on their track record, it's going to be something that I haven't thought about, wow, why would they get that? Why would they need that? So no, I'm not ready
Yeah.
for that one.
This weekend, I actually ended up going to a glass store, and looks like I need some specs. But I noticed the Facebook glasses there, or at least glasses with holes. I wonder what the hell is going on those Ray-Bans. And then it hit me that Facebook have partnered with Ray-Ban to put it in there. And I went to Lens Crafters, which is owned by Luxottica, the same company that owns Ray-Ban. It's a monopoly, and the Facebook glasses are essentially there, or at least what looked like Facebook glasses with the holes for cameras in there. And that tells me they already have a very good distribution, and that's partly the reason they partnered with Luxottica, where the Facebook glasses will make its way into the Ray-Ban store, to Oakley store, to Lens Crafters and whatnot. So they already have a retail presence, and I'm surprised why they're going this route too. It's not like they have a bunch of products. When their primary product they sell is ads, and nobody walks into a store to watch ads. And I'm not, and I don't think Oculus and whatnot would attract it. If Microsoft did not have enough products to sell at the Microsoft store, I don't think Facebook does.
I think this is more like some sort of a lab experiment, that's what it feels like to me. Like when you go in there, you're actually you're there for them. I mean, like sort of look at what people do, and if we do this, how will they react? I don't want to be an experimental lab rat, so no thanks.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brent. I don't want to give them any more data because, as we'll see in just a moment, we're not even sure what they're doing with that data. I'll bring that up from this article, which says Facebook doesn't know what it does with your data or where it goes. So
Surprise.
Surprise.
So come on in, folks. Come to the store.
What we've suspected all along, or the other name for this article, which is water is wet. Very surprising no one. I'll read this out loud. This is an article from Vice, their motherboard. Facebook is facing what it describes internally as a tsunami of privacy regulations all over the world, which will force the company to dramatically change how it deals with users' personal data. And the quote, fundamental problem the company admits is that Facebook has no idea where all of its user data goes or what it's doing with it, according to a leaked internal document obtained by Motherboard.
So in that code, if you put that code back up, Anika, replace data. Imagine a bank saying it, and replace data with money, right? And the company or the bank admits that it has no idea where all of its money goes and what it's doing with it. For Facebook, the currency is data. Users are paying with data, not paying with money. Your users are paying with data, and Facebook has no idea what it's doing with it. And imagine bank saying it, you would freak out, and users should freak out when they read something like this. Yet there's not much of a reaction because there's not a lot of education on that front. That's what's happening here, and there are going to be downstream implications of it, because all of our data is being collected and it's being abused in multiple ways, and Facebook is out of control on it. Banking industry has the regulation. The data industry does not. Money as flows, and everything is documented on where it flows. But data, which is money in a lot of these modern data-centric organizations, has no flow and nothing documented, and users are not in control of it. That is the fundamental problem. That is the reason some legislation is needed, and GDPR and various others are coming through. But again, that's the reason why US need its own legislation to protect the user data. I think that's the fundamental issue here. Facebook has lost track of controlling its primary asset, which is data, and that's a serious issue.
It feels like we've been saying for the last year, well, I guess 7 or 8 months, we're coming up on a year, that these companies, and it's not just Facebook, it's pretty much all these companies, they are just collecting data because they can collect data. They don't even know what they're going to do with this stuff when they're collecting it, because they are just so like, let's just collect it and then we'll figure out how we'll monetize it. And it is so annoying when you think about, we'll just talk about Facebook here because they're the one that is really kind of pushing the whole idea of the metaverse, and we're having data issues galore in the regular universe. So we're expected to let not just them but any company. We're not ready to go to anything this metaverse thing, because if you can't even control or even know where your data, the data that you're collecting, where it is, who has access to it, what they're doing with it, how could you expect us to want to like follow you into some other universe where there's even less regulation or none really, and you want, and it's going to get even more of our data. This is just, it's almost like, are you kidding me? I mean, this really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That they're admitting this, they're opening a store which is going to be a data collection piece. I mean, that's the way I look at it. And it's just more data that they can get, that they don't have any control over, which just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and they're this is from something else I read this morning, that under GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in the European Union, went into effect in May 2018. It's a law that mandates that personal data has to be collected for a specified, explicit, and legitimate purpose. And so if they don't know explicitly what they're doing with that data, then why are they collecting it? And so I think companies are going to get nailed by fines and stuff because they have been doing this in the past, and there hasn't been regulation for that. So it's unsurprising that they'll
I like
get a few
Raju's
fines.
idea.
Yeah.
They should treat data like they treat money,
Yes.
because if they did, none of this would be going on at this point.
Right. Any further thoughts on this?
No, I mean, none of this actually comes as a surprise for us. So I think it's important that we educate people on what's going on. They are giving away too much data, which has to be treated as money. To reiterate what I said so many times, is you're paying either with money, you're paying with your data, or you're paying with other people's data. In either case, if you're paying with money, the people know how to manage and companies know how to manage that, but they don't know how to manage data. It's like storing your money in a bank that doesn't know how to manage money. History shows what happened. What happened to that, right? It doesn't end well.
Yeah.
And I expect the same outcome with companies that do not manage the user data well.
Can we name one of these big companies that you feel real confident in their ability to, manage all this data that they have at their disposal?
For now, I think Apple is the only one I can think of that is close to it. At least it is doing a much better job, and that is the only one that is the closest to it. Everyone is doing a very good job of abusing user data, unfortunately.
Yeah, there was an article that we had shared earlier about if the metaverse can coexist with data privacy laws, and some developers that that they surveyed, they had misgivings. About a third of them had misgivings about whether data privacy would be something that we could achieve in the metaverse. And it seems like it's going to be the biggest hurdle for them to overcome, for sure.
I got to admit, I didn't read any of this because I don't give a damn about metaverse. Partly
Fair
because,
enough.
yeah, I don't like wasting, my brain cycles on this useless crap. So
Yes.
sorry.
Uh, don't hold back, man. Tell us how you really
Yeah.
feel.
I love that for you. We only have so many minutes and hours and days on this earth. It's not something I'm going to use, and not something I'm going to subject myself to. Hmm.
Look, I haven't spent a lot of time on it either. Like I said, we have enough problems in this universe with data. It's just it just feels like, all right, you're creating a whole new place so that you can have even more access, unfettered access to data. I never thought I'd use that term unfettered, but that's the way I feel about it. Yeah, you're creating something that's going to be even less data private than what we are currently going through here. I don't really see a need for that right now either.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let me show you some good news from this week, or potentially good news, which is that Google gives Europe a reject all button for tracking cookies after fines from watchdogs. So they did the right thing after they got nailed with some fines. But basically, Google is introducing new options to reject tracking cookies in Europe after existing dialog boxes were found to be in violation of EU data laws. So Europe gets all the love. Over here in the US, we are still faced with the dark patterns and being forced to accept tracking and all things cookie related.
I think yesterday I was, making a reservation at a hotel, and after the reservation, they have a section that said, "Do not sell my information." I had to opt into it, so I filled in all the information, or I said, I provided my email address and various other things, and he said, I pressed the button, "Do not sell my information," and they said, "Sorry, you're not eligible. This is only for California residents." So it's like privacy has to be defined legally by the local legislation, and only then privacy applies to those, they because these companies have to act, they are acting. They are not acting because they want to do it, or they don't consider it as their moral obligation. Because they have to comply, they try to comply. If not, they'll be slapped with a few $100 million of fine. They are complying. They are not doing us any favor. So that's what's going on. So why is this reject all button available in Europe and not US? Because Google was probably fined a few times, and they have to comply, and they're complying, and we don't have any legislation here. So we basically are being tracked. So that is the unfortunate state of the industry. There, by default, the defaults do matter. By default, they track everyone and anyone. Now, whether this is impactful or not, that's a different scenario, right? The impact of, I think some of these companies moved away from cookies and whatnot. So there are other ways of tracking them, and I'm sure they're doing it. But I have a concern with any company that basically goes just follows the law and tries to be compliant. The company that truly believes in privacy is the one that does the right thing, and as a result, compliance becomes just happens. I don't see many companies out there today in the market that follow that path, and that is the fundamental problem to privacy.
Yeah. Only doing privacy because they are legally obligated. I mean, so you don't think the people that live outside of the state of California would love that option? I mean,
That legal obligation versus a moral obligation is an important point.
yeah,
If they are doing this as a legal obligation, the morality is thrown out the window, and you can associate that with the company that is doing it.
yeah. I just feel like you're right. It's like forced morality is really what we're talking about here, because that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you have all the things in place to allow folks to have that decision. You're just saying basically from a business perspective, no, we're only giving it to the people that we have to give it to. Yeah, that just leaves a pretty sour taste in your mouth, because we know that you could do this. You just choose not to. And that actually makes it even worse. I mean, maybe before, the gold rush scenario I always talk about. All right, you get caught up in the gold rush, so you just go with it. There's nothing really to stop you from doing that. So you just do it. And then somebody says, or one state entity says, you know what? No, we're going to make it. We're going to change that. So you get a chance to think about it and say, okay, well, wow, if they're doing that, well, yeah, I can see that. I understand that. It makes sense. All right, yeah, we'll just do it for everybody because it makes it. No, you're consciously saying, uh, all right, well, we got to do it over here, but that's all it's going, because we want to keep going with what we're doing. Yeah, that just it leaves a very bad look, and unfortunately, I don't see how that changes anytime soon because uh, unlike in Europe, the lobbyists and the companies, they're going to fight it tooth and nail, so they're going to be, you know. You're addicted to the data. I mean, we've talked about this. Data is the drug or the opium for the masses today, and it's kind of hard. I guess it's kind of hard to get off of it when you've had unfettered twice in a day. I've used that term, unfettered access to this data. I mean, you can just you can run around. You don't have to tin pan. You just digital pan, and look at all the data that comes to you. So I guess maybe it's addictive. They don't know how to get away from it, and even when they are given an opportunity to do it, even if it's just legally, they only do what they are required to do, and that's a shame.
I really like. I feel like you've coined a new phrase, Brent, of digital panning. That. I feel like that's such a great way to describe that. They're just, mining for that sweet, sweet negative data.
Sweet to them, that's for sure.
Sweet to them. Good, good catch there. Yes. I have maybe a tough question, which is, or maybe a question that doesn't have such a nice answer, which is for those folks who are living in states where there aren't, regulations for these companies and stuff. What are their options when they're navigating, online and stuff? Raju, would you have any idea of what their options might be aside from like running out into the
Yeah,
forest and
move,
unplugging? Yeah.
move. Unfortunately, that's the only option. You end up voting with your feet, right? And we are seeing quite a bit of those that during the pandemic, and but it's a matter of time before it becomes the norm. There is going to be enough pushback. It is so. What we are asking is so minimal to protect users' data that about ourselves is so minimal that wave is going to push back any state that opposes that. And I don't see some states might have a better rules than others, but in general that becomes the norm, and it'll take some time. And then 20 years from now, if you look back, we would be looking back at how wild west it used to be during the Facebook days. Hopefully 20 years from now it won't exist, but that's what I think. But I'm optimistic on this moving. While we are in the middle of it, it feels like things aren't moving, but I'm optimistic on people, thanks to the awareness, people pushing back and forcing the legislators to enforce some laws that make sense, that protect them.
I have another question for you, which is if you were to uproot your entire life to move somewhere for just the sole purpose of protecting your personal data, if and I feel like you're pretty mindful of like where you're searching and what you're doing and online and things like that, but where would you move if you're just moving for the sole purpose of protecting your data?
I don't know if there is one country. If there is a country that gives me a pseudo passport where I can have an alternative identity that is not metaverse, that'll be interesting. But at this point, certainly Europe has better set of rules. But every rule, every country is gonna do it. Yeah, Europe is probably the location I would move. At least they are the ones ahead. But I think we are going to get to a stage where every country is going to come up with their own thing, and what matters to you will start to. They'll also try to outdo each other, and I'm also thinking you're going to see a lot of decentralization coming in the next decade or two, and that decentralization means decentralized rules, decentralized privacy stuff, which means your privacy is not going to be, if your privacy is abused, it's not going to be globally abused. Currently, that is the case. If it is exposed, it will only be exposed within that region, and that's also, I believe, is where we are heading.
Maybe the Cayman Islands will create a privacy paradise to go along with their financial paradise. I would go there only if I could still get Rams games, because that takes precedence over everything. So
Very good. I'll go with you, Brian. We can be neighbors. Very good. Well, to sort of switch gears in a major way right now, I found an article about Elon Musk.
who
And who
who is that?
buying Twitter. And I have to admit, I don't have too much to say on this, so I'll follow both of your leads on this. I feel like everything I've learned about Elon Musk, I've kind of learned against my will. I've never intended to learn about him, so maybe this is the start of me getting to know this character. So this is an article by Wired with maybe an explosive title called Elon Musk's Twitter buy exposes a privacy minefield. And that does make me worried, as this subheadline says. He secured an agreement on Monday to buy Twitter for about $44 billion. And he's going to take the company private. So thoughts, feelings, comments on this?
I actually like the move. I'm a huge fan of this move, and there are things that you can only do being a private company. That is being bold, right? You can be bold and basically go with your gut, and not based on stockholders and investors and whatnot. So if you have to make any bold changes to a company, it has to be a private company. You cannot do it in the public eye. You're going to be a hit, and it'll be too much to deal with. So the fact that it's going private is a good move. Any changes that will be made, we'll have to see what changes will be made. But there are a few changes I would love to see. One is, change the business model. Imagine trying to do that as a public company. Get out of the ad-based business model, and because that ad-based business model, and then the free speech, all of those, they don't go well each other, and the incentives are not aligned in all these cases. If I were to do it, I would get rid of the ad-based business model and change the model, and it should not get into the attention economy. Take Twitter out of the attention economy. That is not the right thing, and the advertising-based business model has to be removed. And then, public companies as a public company, it is valued based on the user growth and whatnot. They should not be fighting for the most number of users out there. Twitter is basically fighting for the influencers out there. It's an influential platform out there. So those would be some of the critical things out there. But that also means getting out of the advertising business model means they don't have to care for privacy abusers, and they don't have to care for targeting and tracking users, buying data and whatnot. So I'm hoping that would be the direction it would go. I am not holding my breath on it, but if you have to make some sweeping changes like this, you cannot do it in the public eye. It has to be a private company. So for that reason, I really like that move. There are other reasons, but one of the things that Musk said that I like is the open sourcing an algorithm. Now, what exactly that does that mean? We'll have to see. Does that mean they're going to open source the code? Does that mean they're just publishing an algorithm and how they are rating it? But I generally like the direction. Directionally, I like the move. And as a follow up, what happens is, let's say this year Twitter sources their algorithm. There will be pressure on other ad companies like Facebook, like Google, to open source their algorithm and make sure that there is abuse. So I like the follow up to it on what it would lead to. Overall, I'm bullish on the acquisition. Or it can get any worse. It can only better. So I like the move.
Can I ask you a question for the less technical among us, not naming names, but can you tell me or maybe explain a little bit more about the positive impact of open sourcing those algorithms?
Yeah, when you open source an algorithm, what is an algorithm? So how do you see the tweets that you see? What are they prioritizing? And what is the criteria they are using to display the tweets that you're seeing? When and there is a possibility of a bias in there. Is that bias related to maximizing the attention, or are they really showing the relevant ones based on it? That will be exposed when you open source an algorithm. Similarly, to what extent does displaying or maximizing the promoted ads is given a priority over showing what is relevant for the user? Are they doing some tricks to maximize their revenue? That will be exposed when you expose an algorithm. So by open sourcing it, now you have the scrutiny of multiple people who are interested in that, and you get to question that. And it now that also silences certain crowd saying that you're biased one way or the other, saying you are open sourced it. Just take a look. There's no bias in there. If there is one, it can be identified by anyone. Now, there is also some negative sides to it. The fact that you open source algorithm, does that mean, people who took a good look at the algorithm, can they use and understand those to abuse and take advantage of the platform? Certainly, that is a possibility too. And they'll have to plug the holes. So there are positive sides to it, there are negative sides to it. But in my view, the positive sides far exceed the negative sides in this case. The fact that the algorithm is exposed, you know what you're seeing, and it is an open secret here. That is a good thing. Currently, if you look at Google or Facebook, it's a black box. How does the bidding algorithm for Google AdWords work? It's a black box. It is likely that they are maximizing revenue, but it's a black box. We don't have any exposure. So having that extra data publicly available doesn't hurt anyone.
Okay. So I'm going to disagree with you on the Musk acquisition. And I'm not gonna I don't want to couch it as just about him acquiring it as much as any one person acquiring a communications channel that is as important as Twitter is to the general population at this point. Um, I mean, the fact that he bought it for 44 billion, I mean, that's cool that he has the ability to do it. And I think he's doing some really, I mean, he's doing some really interesting and fascinating and important things with Tesla and with SpaceX. I mean, you got to give the guy his credit for taking on big challenges and doing better than anybody has previously to doing that. I just think with Twitter, because of kind of the ubiquity of it and how people, I mean, people depend on that as a one of their major communication channels. The fact that one person, an individual, could have such impact and control over that so many hundreds of millions of people really depend on in a certain way, that makes me very wary, because he is a human being. He has, although money isn't one of those things, he has his ups and downs. He has his foibles. he has his preferences and he has things that he doesn't like. And how do those things play out on a day-to-day basis with somebody who can say, I don't like what that person said, get them out, or oh, I want this person to win the election because it'll really benefit me. So I'm going to do everything I can to, get them the win, and I'll do everything I can to discredit. Not to say that he's doing this or he thinks that. It's just there's the ability for one individual to actually do those things, to actually not just think them, but to do them. I don't know if he'd ever do it or not, but he has the ability would be there. And that's what gives me pause for this. If it was something that wasn't as kind of foundational, it feels like, to the way that we communicate in 2022, maybe I wouldn't have the apprehensiveness as I do, but it is there. So it's not really just about him. It's about any single person having the ability to affect something that has such wide reach. You know, something comes up with the presidential election, something happens, even if it's not that person. If it happens, there's going to be at least a significant part of the population that says, "You see that? That's why." And then the other part is saying, "No, that's." It just feels like there's too much at stake for one person to have that much control over a channel that is so significant to such a huge amount of people. That's my only concern. Not really about him, although there's some questions, but it's really about any one person, even if it's somebody I really like. Like if Eric Dickerson, my favorite Ram of all time, owned Twitter, I would still be like, probably
So,
not.
Brent, did you have the same concerns when Bezos acquired Washington Post or Benioff acquired Time?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're nowhere near as big as Twitter is on a day-to-day basis as what they bought. I mean, you had to raise your eyebrows about Washington Post because you really didn't know if he was going to be able to keep hands off. And so far, it seems like he has. Not to
Yeah,
say
I
that
think
tomorrow he could wake up and do something, you know, but even if he did, or if Benioff did, the impact of them doing that is nowhere near, I think at least, the impact of if somebody, a singular person owning something as big as Twitter, did something.
yeah, I think the if you look at the history of the media control, uh, billionaires owning media empires is nothing new.
No,
I think
William Randolph Hearst is a great
yeah,
example of
yeah,
that.
Rudolph or Murdoch or
Yeah,
then
Rupert Murdoch too. Yeah,
and then MSNBCs to like Gates and all those things. History is littered with billionaires owning media companies and whatnot,
yeah.
and that's where it is. So I don't see that as a big thing. There is a lot of pushback, and not to deviate from the privacy topic. There's a pushback partly because this is a new decentralized media. I think media companies don't like it because if Twitter really becomes stands up to its potential, media companies don't have a big role to play, and that is why there is a pushback from it. And that is what I'm actually rooting for. Where you're directly every influencer. There can be a lot of influencers out there, and the influencers get to have a platform, a centralized platform, or maybe not a centralized, I should say decentralized platform where they can voice their opinion. From that point of view, I really like that move. Yeah, I mean, it the trust on the billionaire might vary. In my case, I would take Musk over Benioff or Bezos any day of the week. So that way, it's where and this might vary by an individual. So that's where I think we'll have to see how it plays out. But my interest, particularly on the privacy side, is the business model change.
Yeah.
From that
Yeah.
point of view, moving out of that business model requires a company to be private. And for that to happen, it has to be someone with deep pockets that has to make the change. And there are not a lot of people that can pull that amount of cash together to acquire a company and make some changes.
Oh, I totally agree with you on that. If he does change, because let's face it, I think the biggest challenge that Twitter has always had is it's not viewed as a destination site. It's, people don't just go and sit at Twitter like they do at YouTube or Facebook. It's like hot news, quick takes. You're on. I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter. But if something big happens, it usually I hear about it from Twitter, and then I go on to another destination site to read about it. That I think that's been their biggest challenge. Now, if he's able to do, I know they made some acquisitions. They brought Review lately. They started doing the Twitter Spaces thing, so they're trying to kind of turn it into somewhat of a destination site. And if he goes down that road and gets out of the ad business, that'd be great. But once
Yeah.
again, I'll go back to there's a great PBS documentary on about William Randolph Hearst and how he built his empire. I mean, he was probably the first media mogul this country's seen, and he owned everything. It felt like, and then he also started to seed or put in his personal agenda into that, and then he tried to run for office a couple. That's why I get apprehensive
Yeah,
when I see somebody do stuff like that.
I think Visual Capitalist did a good graphic out there. Probably should put on Musk's tweets or something like that. About 80% of these tweets are about SpaceX, Tesla, and and Boring Company and whatnot. The way I look at it is the amount of money Tesla spends on marketing is pretty much $0. So marketing budget for Tesla is is Musk's Twitter account, and I like that concept where majority of the R&D or majority of the spend goes towards R&D, and I'm a huge R&D believer in there. In other words, Tesla being a very small company compared to many other automakers out there, their R&D spend is equal to Ford, uh, Toyota, and I believe maybe GM combined, something along those lines, right? For a small company, and as opposed to marketing being zero. So if Twitter and some of these platforms can become the voice of certain brands, and they get to do R&D and get to bring, say, manufacturing back, get to do a lot of R&D, I'm all for it, because what we are seeing is basically an abuse of wastage of dollars in marketing, that is as opposed to going into R&D. Now they are spending on how to buy social security numbers of people, abusing their privacy so that we can target them with an ad to sell our product. So money is going down the wrong path of marketing, and privacy abuse is a result of it. Instead, I would rather prefer money go towards R&D.
I couldn't agree with you more. And if he does that, if he's able to change the way that marketing is done, that would be huge. At least more privacy first marketing as opposed to what's going on now. It's like I said, we're still in the wild wild west where people are just
Yeah.
throwing digital tin pans anywhere because and you just throw it up and you're going to catch a lot of data. You don't even know what it is yet, but it's going to be it could be something. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
totally
so
agree.
far I like this. The marketing spend of all his companies combined is $0. I like that trend.
That's amazing. Yeah. Annika,
Well,
what do you think? Don't You're always asking us, what do you think about this?
well, I think I've learned more about Elon Musk in the past 5 minutes than I have in the past 12 months. So thank you both for enlightening me. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I hope that I can be cautiously optimistic. I have to say, if you have $1 billion, I immediately don't trust you. I'm like, how did you make that? What did you do? So we'll see what happens.
Well, at least with his, you could actually see how he made it
Oh,
between
okay.
PayPal and SpaceX and Tesla and other things. It's the folks who you don't see how they made it. The dark sciences. That's where. So I give him a lot of credit. I have no and the fact that he calls himself a billionaire and he can back it up. Whereas, there are questions about others who say things like that.
And what you do with it is more important. What you do with those billionaires,
Exactly.
billions, right? I think I truly believe in taking that money and putting them back into more R&D. Like it doesn't have to invest in Neuralink, doesn't have to do space programs, doesn't have to do whatnot. You can go and buy a island in Hawaii, or you can put that money towards R&D, and what you're doing with that matters.
Yeah. Like you can see where his money is gone because he spent sending spaceships up and then bringing them back down to be reused. That is amazing when you think about it. So he's one of those guys. Like I don't agree with everything he says. Don't get it wrong, but the big accomplishments like that, that just shows you how brilliant a guy is, and he's willing to put his money where his mouth is in those regards.
And there is one other point I'll make, tangentially related to this. Excuse me. Is I think I made this earlier. Centralized algorithms won't work in a decentralized world. Today, I would consider Twitter's algorithm or Facebook or Google as a centralized algorithm, and you cannot have a one algorithm that is created in one country, one region with certain culture to work exactly the same way in a different country with a different culture, different belief system, different way of people thought process and whatnot, and their history. So you cannot take a US algorithm and expect that to work in China or India or Europe or Australia for that matter. There has to be tweaks that are made. So I'm not a believer in a global algorithm, and those things will. I hope to get to a stage where we'll see a decentralized algorithms that is specific to each of those. If that doesn't exist, you will see these individual algorithms and individual social networks as well as search engines pop up by region with their own algorithm out there. I believe that is where we are headed, and open sourcing it is another way where how biased or unbiased it is, and based on that, you'll see regional tweaks that have to be made, and some companies may just adopt those algorithm, make the necessary tweaks in for their region, and take it. So we are heading towards that path.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about the open source algorithms and stuff. It sounds to me like it's a way to be a little bit more transparent, which I think is generally great. We love to see it. Well, we're almost running out of time here, but I wanted to pop up this important piece of news that spurred Tejas into a frenzy over chat the other day, which is about, let's see, this is an article from Insider. There are many articles about this, but this is from some privacy changes that Apple made on its iOS 14, and an influencer saying basically it's only going to get worse about the basically different impacts that Apple's broad sweeping privacy changes that they've made, and how companies like Netflix, etc., have their stocks have just plummeted. I guess as a result of these changes.
Just last week we talked about, I think, one article that says Apple changes had no impact on it. Right? That tells you what's going on. With each one has their own take. At the end of the day, the reality is going to be in the numbers, and those are showing. Yeah, but people care about privacy. What we are basically seeing here is companies build their distribution on other companies. Like Netflix probably built their distribution on Apple and maybe Google and a few others, right? So App Store is a distribution channel in this case. And similarly, there are a ton of other companies that build their entire business on companies like Facebook and Google, which built their reach abusing user privacy. So the reach is obtained and distribution targeting, all of that happened because they were able to collect all this information, and you need that information for targeting. And some of the big data brokers, and like Facebook and Google, I would put them in that bucket, they have the targeting capability. So that is the reason other companies rely on their targeting capability to reach the audience they want to. And but the fundamentally the targeting capability comes because of data collection, and basically collecting user data without their permission. That is user privacy abuse. Now when that fundamental data collecting aspect of it, that data collecting industrial complex is questioned, then others tend to fall apart. Which means when Facebook or Google or Apple or others don't have the same way of targeting the users because of these privacy restrictions that are added, then companies built on top of it, like maybe a Netflix or various others, who relied on it to expand their user base, are going to be impacted, and they are being impacted. So this is just the beginning, and I hope Apple continues their stance on privacy. And note that it's not Apple adding restrictions. All Apple is doing is providing the option for the users for the first time, and users are choosing to not provide their data. Surprise, right? So what was otherwise an abuse is now basically, that is now the control is given back to the user, and users rightly chose not to provide their information. And we are seeing the side effects. So this entire advertising industrial complex is built on data leeches, and which is being curtailed by the privacy thing. And and it's not a surprise that the user numbers are coming down because they no longer have the same targeting capability. And you're going to see this. I agree with Chamat. We're going to see this across the board. When the targeting capability goes down, then user growth goes down, because user growth is built on on targeting users based on abusing their privacy and whatnot. So all of these are interconnected, and it will come down, and I hope it does. And the marketing industry has to reach some kind of a sanity here. There are about 3 or 4 thousand companies in the marketing market. I don't think there is room for 3 or 4 thousand companies. Most of them unprofitable in this market, and all of this these are interconnected.
Annika, can I ask you to put up that image of the paper of the screenshot of that article? And yeah, it's only going to get worse. Okay. From whose perspective are we talking about here? We're not talking about users, right? I mean, how does it get worse for them if they have, as Raju pointed out, the option to protect their data more and more as Apple is starting to roll out? So it's not getting worse for users, right? I mean, it's already been pretty bad from their perspective because they had absolutely no say as to where their data goes, who has access to it, what's done with it, up until the 14.5 update, at least for iPhone users. So it ain't getting worse for them. It's only getting worse for the folks who are, as I like to say, addicted to the data. They're you throw a digital pan in the sky and you come back and it's like wow, all this stuff in it. Yeah. So it's getting worse for them because they're gonna have to finally work a little bit harder to not get people's attention and then turn that attention into trust. And then, because if people they trust you, they will give you the data. If you give them a good reason that you need it, which is to hopefully to provide a better experience, product, service for them, not to fill your pockets. So yeah, does that uh does that statement make any of us feel sorry? It's going to get worse for them. Oh, I'm sorry about that. No, of course not. It's not going to happen. And I go back to what Tim, I want to call him Tim Apple, the, the founder of, I mean, the CEO of Apple, Tim, whatever his last name is, his statement at that IAPP summit: the data industrial complex is built on the foundation of surveillance. that has to be done away with. And moves like what Apple has done that chip away from that, that's a good thing, generally speaking. And if it forces companies to have to rethink their business model, to react differently, to now have to ask for trust and to earn trust and not just take, so be it. I have no problem with it.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit of context about like the scale of what these companies are losing. It says Netflix, this is just from a headline from Variety, Netflix loses $54 billion in market cap after biggest one-day stock drop ever. Just one day, yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
because
mean,
they
we
lost
can ignore.
200,000 subscribers for the first time. They actually lost that during their earnings call, and people just freaked out. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I think there is only a partial a portion of it has to do with privacy. Majority of
right?
it is it's just a bubble bursting. Everyone benefited from the free flow of money, and then it's coming down to normal. So it's not a surprise.
Yeah, and it's
I'll be
competition.
surprised.
There's
Yeah, I'll
more
be
more subscription models out there, and I mean, who you can't afford to own all these these monthly fees for Netflix and Prime and Disney Plus and HBO Max. I mean, there's only so many things you can subscribe to, and I think Netflix is the competition is catching up, and people are also. I mean, this is way out of the privacy lane, but people are also getting fed up with every year they are increasing their prices, and it's like, why? And so I think people are finally getting fed up. I don't know.
Yeah, and the when it comes to the competition is good.
Yeah.
That means in the context of this, but in the context of marketing, the fact that there are 4 or 5 thousand companies in the marketing domain is
Mm.
one of the reasons the privacy is being abused. These are 4 or 5 thousand companies that are abusing user privacy because everyone is after this data, and that's why the abuse has gone. There is a consolidation needed in that industry, and along with it comes down the data collection, hopefully, and it still will be concentrated among maybe a dozen or so, but that is something worth closely watching.
Thank you both for the context on that. It does sound like that big drop is about a bunch of different variables. That's important to know. Yeah. Well, thank you both for having me on. Any final thoughts about what we've discussed this week in privacy?
No, I think the number of topics we discuss will only keep going up. Unfortunately, I hope we get to a stage where we don't have to do a show a week because there's no news on privacy abuse. But looks like we have to do multiple seasons in the way it's going currently.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well, on
got
that note,
one
yeah.
last thing to say. We don't even need Tejas anymore. Annika, you're doing such a great job.
Aw, thanks.
Oh, he could come back. We'll bring him back.
Well, sorry I've been so quiet today. I'm trying to mute myself when there's people floating around and stuff. But yeah, this sure was fun. Thank you both so much for having me on. I feel like I learned so much from doing this. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you for all the work you've been doing.
Absolutely.
Awesome work you're doing in the background, Annika. It's good to see you in front of the camera.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, goodbye, my fellow Los Angeles fan. You understand me, and I'll see you next week, Raju, and we'll have Tejas back in here. So I'll talk to you in our little chat. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.